Welcome back to my mental health and crime channel. My name is Huda London. This is the case of the Idaho quadruple murders. May the victims rest in peace. Justice for the victims, condolence to their families. And may Brian Koberger get a fair trial that he's entitled to by law. He's innocent until proven guilty. I'd like to start by showing you all the body cam of Brian Koberger in Washington Pullman University. The reason that I would like to start by this is because I wanted to go through the PAPPA ROGERS text on social media and the exchange of the comments. But I'd like to start by showing you all this body cam so that we can pay attention to Brian Christopher Koberger's accent and his voice. Because I'd like to compare it to somebody called in on social media, I guess, or spoke on social media. This was before the arrest.
Hello, I am Officer Langus. Stops being audio and video recorded. Again, I think you know why I stopped you. You were in the red light.
What actually happened was I was stuck in the middle of the intersection.
Yeah,
so I was
behind you the whole time. Yeah.
Yeah.
So technically you're not supposed to enter the intersection at all for that reason, because if the light turns red, then you're stuck in the intersection, and then you're on the red light. So that's the reason I stopped you. Do you have your license on you?
Yep.
Do you have the registration and insurance?
We just get this for you out.
You what?
I'm just gonna get this out for you.
Okay.
So would you explain that to me a little bit further? So in Pennsylvania, when you're stuck like in the intersection, you have to make the left. So what would the appropriate thing for me to have done? Just
You're not supposed to block an intersection like that in Washington, so just by you blocking the intersection, that's technically a ticketable violation, and then you're running a red light, so it's another ticketable offense. So you're not supposed to proceed into the intersection until you can go, because a lot of people do what you just did, right? Is like you're sitting in the intersection waiting, and then it turns, and then you're blocking, so.
Yeah, there was a little bit of confusion with speeding because someone had stopped. I wasn't sure what they were doing, and then they put on their light to turn. Mm-hmm. So I thought that maybe they were letting me go through.
Oh.
Did you see that?
No. Mm-hmm.
I feel like right before I made the turn, there was someone who made a right. They didn't have their signal on, so I wasn't sure if they were just waiting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I would just advise just don't enter the intersection until you can go, so you don't get stuck. Let's see.
But in that situation, the best thing to do then would be back up. And not...
I don't know if there's a best thing to do in that situation, because you're either going to back up into somebody, or you're going to run a red light. So, or you're going to be sitting in an intersection. There's not really a great option there.
Yeah, I was just slightly into the crosswalk, so...
Mm-hmm.
Where I'm from Pennsylvania, we actually don't have, like, crosswalks.
Oh.
So even if you're kind of slightly... there's a little bit more leeway as well. Like, there are a few lines. Like, there's one white line and there's another one.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's like a certain margin from which you can actually kind of put your vehicle, place your vehicle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I know laws vary state to state, but there is a law in Washington for blocking an intersection like that, proceeding through when when you're just stalling. I forget the actual verbiage, I can find it for you, but it's like stalling, blocking an intersection.
Yeah. I'm just curious about the law. I don't mean to...
Oh, no, yeah, I can find it for you. Yeah. Mm-hmm. 1 second. That looks good on a Hyundai. I don't see Pennsylvania registration like at all. Okay, let's see. Expires November 22nd, or 2022. Okay. And
Yeah, one of those is actually.
yeah, okay, that looks good. I'll hand that back to you. I'm just gonna go check your info. I'll try to find that RCW, the law for you, and I'll be right back.
Thank you.
All right. Sierra 331, code 4 driver. West of Coburger, King, Ocean, Henry, Boy, Edward, Robert, George, Edward, Robert, first of Brian, Boy, Robert, Young, Adam, Nora, middle C, Charles, date of birth 112194, Mount Washington. Good.
Benefit license through Washington 11/2027. The vehicle is valid on a 2005 Hyundai Sonata.
Copy, it should be an Elantra. Recent.
Copy, it might be, it actually says the van, so it's my bad.
Sierra 334 stopping.
334.
King 568889 through Idaho. Will be Stadium Q parking lot.
1638.
Okay, so I found it. So I don't know what in Pennsylvania where you go to find laws, but in Washington it's called the Revised Code of Washington. So I'll try to turn my brightness up, but it's just called an RCW. So it's RCW 46.61.202. So it's no driver shall enter an intersection unless there is significant space on the other side of the intersection. To accommodate the vehicle, he is operating without obstructing the passage of other vehicles, despite any traffic control signal indications to proceed. So you had a green light, so you're thinking you can go, but you're blocking the intersection. So that's, if you're ever curious, in any laws in Washington, just Revised Code of Washington. So I'm not writing a ticket or anything like that today. I understand you're from Pennsylvania, but in the future, don't proceed through the intersection. You can't get stopped for that alone, unless you can clearly just clear it right away.
Okay.
So
then basically, I understand.
you're just supposed to wait behind the white line. Drivers do it all the time,
It
but
never even occurred to me that that was actually something wrong.
Yeah.
Well, except for the fact that I was blocking the crosswalk, which is what
Yeah.
I went through.
and states vary a lot from laws. Like Pennsylvania might not even have that law, but in Washington we do.
I'm actually just from a very rural area,
Mhm.
so we just don't have crosswalks.
Oh,
Unless I visit an area where there are
Gotcha.
crosswalks, and then it's not very frequent.
yeah.
Yeah, I do apologize if I was asking you too many questions about the law. I wasn't trying to
No, not at all. Like, I understand you're not from here, so, if you don't, a lot of people don't know a bunch of laws. Like, I only know it because this is what I do, but, yeah. If you're ever curious on any more laws,
I personally think that Brian Christopher Koberger was being polite, so it just shows some of his characters. And I remember in the beginning of this case, there was a report about Brian Koberger working as a security guard in Pennsylvania, in a supermarket, I believe. And he was really helpful. A woman had a seizure or I believe an asthma attack, and it was a critical situation. He helped to save her life. He revived her until the pandemics came there. So I really think that is a good sign for him, and I hope they use that in court, because it's important to check every aspect of a person's life. If he was this cold, bloody killer, trigger warning that they were saying, and calling him a psychopath, as the mental health counsel, I believe that shows he did have empathy of saving a life. So I believe somebody who tries to save lives could take lives, but I don't see that to be a fair assessment, because it does show empathy, emotions. That just shows that he has emotions and empathy. Apologize, my son was singing a bit on the background. But what I'm trying to say is it does show definitely that he has empathy. He cares about human life, and he reacted quite quickly. It's not every security guard that would try and do first aid. They would rather call 911, but he saved someone's life, and that just shows he has empathy, according to me. And now I'd like to talk about the PAPPA ROGERS text exchange. I've heard many people saying that they believe PAPPA ROGERS is Enon. And I've heard many people saying that it's Brian Koberger. I wouldn't make any assumption on who it is, because when people are talking on social media, and if you do not see the face, or texting in social media, it is hard to make an assessment on who it could be. It could be someone from the fraternities. Honestly, it can be anyone. Well, let's go through this. So the person who was going by the name of PAPPA ROGERS starts by saying, why did the killer choose that house over all the others in the area? Question mark. What do we think is the entrance point to the crime scene? Question mark. One knife and 4 people? The killer took a big risk. The knife could have easily broken off or become ineffective after 1 or 2 murders. Are we sure there's only 1 knife involved? Excellent question. I always believed that there was more than 1 weapon involved. Possibly 2, 3. I wouldn't be surprised if there was other sharp-edged weapons that was used, like Eaton's golf kit, because that is frozen by the coat. Anything can be used as a weapon. It doesn't necessarily have to be a knife. This person seems to be playing a sick game. Do we think the killer took anything from the house? Question mark. Possibly, I would say, because 1 count of robbery is in it, unless they're considering the trespassing of a house robbery. How long do we think the killer was in the house? Question mark. Then Papa Rogers says he's having a case discussion. Of the evidence released, the murder weapon has been consistent as a large fixed blade knife. This leads me to believe they found the sheet, the knife sheet. This evidence was released prior to the autopsies. Whoever this person is seems to know a lot of information about the crime scene. Who knows, it could be even DM or BF, allegedly. There were many people in the crime scene. It doesn't necessarily have to be Beaky. This reminds me of the 4chan post. The frat boys were quite good anonymous person to explain in the 4chan post. Wouldn't be surprised if it's them. Then Dustin Stubblefield says, fixed blade means that it's not a folding knife. The way I'm guessing they could tell was by impressions of bruising around the stab wounds that showed the outline of a guard on the knife. Then Papa Rogers replies, Author, Dustin Stubblefield. You wouldn't be able to tell that at the crime scene. That's strange. Then Papa Rogers says they don't clean bodies at a crime scene. The amount of blood must have been tremendous. Dustin Stubblefield says, due to the number of victims and assuming each victim was stabbed multiple times, I'm sure that there was visible evidence of a guard. For all we know, the investigators on the scene wiped a couple stab wounds clean to look for bruising. I think it's far more logical than finding a sheet. Sheets are usually attached to a belt. Great question. Papa Rogers says, but the police were very specific about the type of knife used. They were. Scott Jute reportedly told them his shop doesn't sell the specific knife. So this has to be someone in Idaho, Moscow, because he knows Scott Jute is shop and the name of Scott Jute. Then the expert Papa Rogers says, who knows everything. Who knows? Finding a left behind sheet seems like a stretch though. Papa Rogers says to Dustin Stubblefield, why? Question mark. They're very specific about the weapon, but very vague about every other detail. Dustin Stubblefield says, Papa Rogers, I think it's more likely that they did closer examinations on the wound on the scene than you think. Good question. But I really don't believe that the police would do an assessment on the scene. I think they were busy taking pictures of the crime scene. And then the coroner came in between 5 to 5:30. She must have done a bit of assessment, and then the bodies must have been transported. They can analyze depth of the wound with serrated edge would be a big clue. I'm sure they have access to database that will show knives that match those dimensions. Plus, knife in a sheet could cause them problems. Papa Roger says, which hand? Question mark. Papa Roger, I don't freaking know. Lol. Why would you even ask that? Dustin Stubblefield. So a knife wielding person walked from. Dustin Stubblefield says, Papa Roger, someone who's about ready to commit a premeditated murder. If you were sneaking into someone's house looking to kill them with a knife, would you have the knife in a sheet when you entered? Question mark. I think the killer had it in his hand upon entering just in case he was confronted and forced to fight. Then we have Papa Rogers saying, how did the killer hold the knife prior to entering the scene? That is a very good question, Papa Rogers. I thought of that. I'm sure the killer did actually come with a knife sheet inside the knife, others it would have poked him. Unless he just came without one and somebody It's somebody else's knife sheath, but it has the touch DNA. The touch DNA can even come from somebody shaking your hand and then going and committing the murders. Finally, Papa Rogers woke up. He said, "How in the hell would I know that?" ? I'm sorry that nobody's buying this sheet theory of yours. Dustin Stumblefield says, "Papa Roger, if we find out one day and I'm wrong, I will gladly eat crow." Papa Roger says, "Dustin Stubblefield, do you carry a knife?" ? Wow. Dustin Stubblefield says, "Papa Rogers, dude, give it a rest. You sound like a psychopath." Dustin Stubblefield, "Papa Rogers, also since I commented on your post with my opinion on a discussion board, I should be accepting of your weird and creepy ass questions? ? Papa Rogers says, "Dustin Stumblefield, asking if you carry a knife is weird and creepy." Papa Rogers, Dustin Stumblefield says, "Papa Rogers, asking me questions like, which hand did he hold the knife in? And do you carry a knife with no context is just strange. You are asking me questions that only the killer would know answers to. Are you suggesting that I'm the killer?" Papa Rogers says, "Dustin Stumblefield, I'm only responding to you. Why would you even bring up the killer?" Oh, so the killer is a touchy subject for Mr. Papa Rogers. Papa Rogers says, "Dustin Stumblefield, I'm only responding to you. Why would you even bring up the killer though? Odd." Dustin Stumblefield said, "Papa Rogers, sorry I trashed your stupid sheet theory and you could take it. Papa Rogers, any other brain buster theories? Maybe they found a receipt laying in the kitchen for the knife." Papa Rogers says, "Why are you angry?" Dustin Stumblefield says, "Papa Rogers, I'm going to go out of the limb and assume it's not the first time you've heard that. Anyways, I would love to stay and chat, but I'm going to go back to living my life now. Try not to creep everyone out." The Mary Smiley says, "Dustin Stumblefield, do you definitely give serial killer vibes? So strange and creepy." Melissa Lukin Trenkamp, "Papa Rogers, you very likely would be able to tell due to the time they were found and when they were killed." Excellent question. This is a couple of days later, on the 10th of December. 4 weeks in and no suspects? What is the motive? ? That's Papa Rogers, yeah? Then Papa Rogers says, "How long do we think the killer was in the house? ? He's still playing his ridiculous games." And then University of Idaho murders case discussion. I think this was on Facebook. "Regardless of what has been released, I believe this is a sexually motivated crime." University of Idaho murders case discussion again. "Did the killer drive, walk, or some combination of both to the scene?" Let me answer you that question, Papa Rogers. I think the killer drove. I believe he walked. Both of the combinations. The reason I say that is the body cam in Banfield of the minor alcohol swap. I personally believe they're involved somehow or the other, including Saeed. The reason I say that he drove to is we could see the light, the car light at 3 a.m. from the girl's house that was in the beginning. A knife, did the killer drive, walk, or some combination of both to the scene? ? Then Papa Rogers says, "A knife is a very risky weapon. If you know you are going to murder 4 people, do we think the killer also had another weapon such as a stun gun or something?" A knife is a very risky weapon. If you know you are going to murder 4 people, do we think the killer also had another weapon such as a stun gun or other knife? Or did they not know? A knife is a very risky weapon. If you know you are going to murder 4 people, do we think the killer also had another weapon such as a stun gun or another knife? Or did they know? That's a good question. Why did the killer choose the house over all the others in the area? Good question. Could it be because it was a party house? Could it be because it was more isolated than the other houses? Could it be because the victims and the targets were in that house? Could it be because that house or the resident had something that the killer wanted? It could be for many reasons. Papa Rogers is getting a bit more rude. He says, this is a discussion of the case. You are participating by choice. Wow. And then Kelly Himberg says, Papa Rogers, the 4 victims didn't participate by choice. You are one sick individual. Glad you are. I find this question to be very interesting. Did the killer stop at 4 victims out of exhaustion, convenience, or lack of knowledge? I believe personally that the killer stopped at 4 victims because he came for those 4 victims. The other 2 surviving roommates, he knew that they were in the house, that's my personal opinion, but he wasn't out for them. And I could think of it as another way, if it was the fraternity boys and sororities, then he stopped at the 4 victims because they knew exactly which 4 victims they wanted to attack. Look at the 4chan. They had 3 victims, Ethan, Xana, and Mary. And they even said that Kaylee was just there. So I don't think he did it. He had knowledge of who exactly was in the house. Or maybe the 2 surviving roommates was working with the killer. I hate to say that, but that's my opinion only. And then he says, Papa Rogers says, thoughts on the body's placement? Okay, I'll give you my thoughts. Papa Rogers, I believe the bodies were moved after the killer left. The 2 surviving roommates, allegedly the Sigma Chi boys that they called, were acting doctors and taking pulse, could have rearranged the bodies. I really believe that the killings could have even happened somewhere else, in front of the house, in Linda Lane, wheresoever. So anything is possible. I believe the bodies were rearranged, and I believe this was a stage scene. Google Chan shows the search history for the house by date. Lots of Thursday activities. What do we think? So Thursdays, there was a lot of activities. Is that why whoever did this crime decided to do it on a early Sunday timing? Could be possible. So that was the Papa Rogers text message. It could have been anyone. I don't understand why people are saying that it's Brian Koberger. Please like, share, and subscribe. Justice for the victims. May they rest in peace. Condolence to their families. And may Brian Christopher Koberger get the correct justice that he's entitled to. If he's guilty, he's guilty. If he's not, they need to release him.